Wrestling is life. Wrestling is life. Wrestling is life is wrestling.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Wrestling is Life is Wrestling with Cody Deaner. I am Cody Deaner, and I am a professional wrestler. I'm a professional wrestling producer. I am a professional motivational speaker. I'm a father to 4 children and a husband to a beautiful wife, and I am a podcaster. This is my podcast. This is Wrestling is Life is Wrestling, and we explore professional wrestling. We explore life and everything in between and how they connect. Well, my life is connecting to wrestling and connecting to this podcast in the news that I dropped last week. I let you know about my sponsor. You've been listening to me. If you've been listening to the podcast, if you haven't and you're new, welcome. But if you've been listening to my podcast for the last, month and a half, you've been hearing me put over Rest When Dead clothing. If you're watching this on YouTube right now, you see my Rest When Dead signature series Cody Deaner hat. You see my signature series Cody Deaner t-shirt in the background, as well as the very popular Reaper Rest When Dead shirt. And you've been listening to me put them over, not just because they're an awesome company with awesome merchandise, but they also think the same way I do. They give back to the community. With every single sale, they give back to the fitness community and the people that they work with and donate money back into the community. And they only use the highest of quality local products. They use local vendors, local people to give back to the economy in their area. All of these things, these positive mindsets that I believe in. And you heard the news last week that I'm not just now a sponsored athlete with Rest When Dead clothing. I am now the vice president of Rest When Dead clothing. How the hell did that happen? Good question. I didn't think that when I started a podcast, a couple of months ago, that I'd be the vice president of a clothing line. Was not my intention, guys, when I started this project. My intention with this podcast is the same as it was when I started it, and that is to put out some positive wrestling content, because I travel all across North America, sharing my story, my wrestling journey with young people as a speaker. And as I tell them my journey, I teach them the lessons that I've learned along the way, with both my successes and my failures, and all the lessons that I've learned about that. And I've met some amazing people in the wrestling business that have a story to tell, and they have lessons too. So I decided I was going to start this project, put some positive things out into the world, because there's a lot of negative wrestling podcasts out there. If you're listening to this wanting to hear some scoops and some negative dirt and shade being thrown, you're in the wrong place. You can turn it off right now, because that's not what we're about here at Wrestling is Life is Wrestling. We're about positivity. So I put positivity out into the world. I asked if anybody wanted to sponsor this podcast, and through that positivity I put out there, I ended up meeting the fine folks at Rest When Dead Clothing, Aaron York specifically, the president and CEO of the company. And we got chatting, we did good business together, and he was so thrilled with, I guess, the work that I was putting in with pushing his stuff. I decided to go above and beyond my pushing of Rest When Dead for a couple of reasons. One, I believe in the product. 2, I'm only going to put my name behind something that I believe in. 3, I believe in Rest When Dead, and like I said earlier, their mindset of wanting to put positive things out into the world and give back to the community. So just everything about it just felt right to me. So I pushed it harder than I even needed to. And the response that Rest When Dead got from me doing that was nothing but positive and amazing. And they decided, we want you to be the face of the company. And I'm willing to be the face of a company if it's a company I believe in. And that company is Rest When Dead. So if you want to learn more about Rest When Dead, you want to see some of the amazing products that they have, including the signature series, not just the signature series I just told you about in my signature series, like this hat and this t-shirt, but the signature series of 2 wonderful, amazing professional wrestlers that work with me in TNA Impact Wrestling. Number one, my buddy Crazy Steve. Crazy Steve's episodes are still being downloaded and listened to and watched by so many people, and I'm getting feedback constantly about it. They're in the archives, so if you did not listen to my Crazy Steve episodes about the wild and wacky yet super inspiring journey of a blind professional wrestler that came from literally nothing, go back and listen to the story and journey of my friend Crazy Steve in the archives. He is also working with Rest When Dead. He is a Rest When Dead sponsored athlete, and he has such a cool shirt. Soon as I get it shipped, I'll be wearing it probably on every single episode. So get your Crazy Steve signature series shirt, as well as another person who has not been on the podcast, but I think we should have her on here sometime soon. And I'm talking about Jody Threat. She is also a TNA Impact star, and she also lives by the mottos, the mindset of Rest When Dead. She's also Canadian, like me and Steve, and loves supporting a Canadian brand. So go check out Jody Threat's signature series shirt. It's my understanding that the dog on that shirt is her real dog in real life because she loves animals. She's an animal lover. She is a lover of life and a lover of pushing through towards your goals and always moving forward. That's Jody Threat for you. And she's got a signature series t-shirt over at restwhendead.ca. Go check those out in the entire collection. Let them know that the Deaner sent you. Talking about putting positive things out into the world, let's talk about my guest today, my friend Shawn Spears. I got some wonderful feedback last week from listeners that were either listening on Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcast, or a lot of people that watched it on YouTube over at Cody Deaner Podcast on YouTube. And the feedback that I got was nothing but positive. Why? I think for a number of reasons. One, I think it was so cool to have Shawn Spears open up and be vulnerable about his personal life and share some things that he doesn't typically share. I think it's a mixture of the fact that I don't ask the typical questions. It's not like, oh, who's your favorite wrestler? What's your favorite match? You know, tell me about this moment in your career. Those podcasts are great, but that's not what this is about. I want to talk about, life. And Shawn opened up about his life and some of the ways that he views life and his career in last week's part one of our conversation. And it's stuff that he doesn't normally talk about with just anybody. And that leads to the second reason I think he talked to me about it is because I'm his friend. I've been his friend for 2 decades. And at the end of last episode, part one, we had a cliffhanger and we were just starting to get into Shawn Spears' tryout experience with the WWE. And I come into his story in a very interesting way at this moment in his career because I was doing some dark matches and WWE stuff with Shawn Spears right at this time. And I was right alongside him as he was doing it. We were doing some of these WWE tryouts together. So we ended with a cliffhanger last week where I was talking about how I came into that story and 2 things that I remembered about that. And then we cut it off. And that was the end of part 1. Some of you have already listened to part 2, today's conversation, because after that cliffhanger, you couldn't wait until this week to listen to it. So you went over to patreon.com/Cody Deaner and you became a patron. You supported me in this project. And for that, I thank you. I can't thank you enough to all my patrons. They've been wonderful. So you can be that too. If you want to listen to next week's guest, we're not even through this week yet, but I'm already talking about next week because you can listen to next week's guest early and ad free coming up soon here at patreon.com/Cody Deaner, as well as bonus stories. Like I said just a few moments ago, I said I don't really ask your typical questions about, significant moments in wrestlers' careers, but I did just exclusively for my patrons, I asked Shawn Spears about the 2017 Royal Rumble, what that meant to him, and kind of how did that even come to fruition. And the answer that I got was astounding. It made me laugh and it made me cry. If you want to hear that exclusive bonus story about Tye Dillinger, the Perfect 10, being the number 10 entrance in the Royal Rumble, how he learned about this, which is hilarious, and the response that he got from the WWE locker room, that's the part that made me cry. Go on over to patreon.com/Cody Deaner right now, and you can both watch that story in video form or download it and listen to it in audio format. That's patreon.com/Cody Deaner. Other ways you can support is by going to prowrestlingtees.com/Cody Deaner and buy yourself a t-shirt. We have, for just my fans of this podcast, we now have Wrestling is Life is Wrestling with Cody Deaner logo t-shirts over on my Pro Wrestling Tees store. You're a fan of the podcast, you want to let everybody know that, head on over to prowrestlingtees.com/Cody Deaner and buy yourself a t-shirt. If you want me to send you a very personal message, we got the holidays coming up. We got Christmas time. I want to send out some Christmas messages to some aunts and uncles and cousins and whoever wants a video. What a good gift for a family member. Get a cameo from me over at cameo.com/Cody Deaner. But after you've done that, you've rated, reviewed, and subscribed this podcast and supported me in all these various ways, then you can just now stop supporting me and just listen. Just kick back and listen to this part 2 of my conversation with Shawn Spears. Like I said, where we left off, we left on the cliffhanger of how did I come into this story of this WWE tryout experience with Shawn Spears? Well, let's hear now as we continue this conversation with my friend and yours, AEW All Elite Wrestling superstar, Shawn Spears.
An opportunity came and I had reached out and they said, yeah, come do a tryout. Like it was just literally by luck and happenstance that it was the right time.
So I remember I come into this story here, and I don't know if you remember this, but I'm going to give you my perspective of things. And it's not to put me over in any way, but by all means. I do. There's two things that I remember vividly as you're talking about this. One was I had done a tryout. I wrestled Kurt Angle on SmackDown, and I got this tryout, and a lot of the guys on the Ontario scene were like, "Oh man, this is so cool!" Like it kind of lit a fire under some of them, seeing one of their guys kind of get to TV and realize, "Oh wait, like this can happen." And my confidence was at an all-time high because I was able to do that, hang, and realize, "Oh wait, I belong. I can belong there." But before that, I'm like, "Oh no, those guys are up here. I'm just down here. I'm nothing." Now my confidence at all-time high. And this was back in the day where not everything got filmed and put on YouTube, and you could just send a link to anybody at any moment of a very highly produced match. Like you had to work to try to film a match that was 8 minutes to send into talent relations, to try to get this a good match. And you were like, "Hey, I need to film this match. Let's do a match." And me and you wrestled in Neo. It was like an 8-minute babyface match.
You remember
and we're like, we're gonna get this down. Like, yep. And I knew what they were looking for, so we had this match. And at the end, you weren't sure if you were ready to send something in. And I remember kind of laying into you and being like, "Yes, you are. Shut your mouth. Send it in now. Like you're gonna get a call." And you sent it in, and Tommy Dreamer called you.
Mm-hmm.
And then you and I went to Pennsylvania. We did it. I think we did it. I remember it was at least the one Pennsylvania.
I was going to touch on this. This was before. Okay. We did a couple Pennsylvania loops. I was going to bring this up when you were talking about the earlier on days.
Okay. Yeah.
Do you want to touch on it, or do you want me to?
No, you go ahead. This is you. I'm interviewing you. You go ahead. You go.
So I'm going in the right direction.
Okay.
So I think we've done a couple strings. We used to drive to Pennsylvania together, being Ontario boys. And there was a time where we were getting booked kind of regularly, almost every other weekend.
Mm-hmm.
I was also working at the casino. I did get a job there while I was still wrestling, and I was working the graveyard shift. My dad, who is now a higher up there, got me in the door. Funny enough, that by the time I got picked up by WWE, I was one write-up away from being fired because I took so many like sick days and so many going to Pennsylvania or going to those places to do WWE tryouts, and I was one write-up away. And you need like 7 write-ups to get fired from the casino.
Wow.
Yeah. So I was like number 6. But I remember one time we got down there, and this is at the time where they had everybody around the ring, and there's 20 or 30 year guys, and Johnny Ace at the time, or whoever the fuck was there, was walking around, and they're like, "All right, we're gonna do matches. We're gonna do quick 5-minute matches." And I'm standing beside you. I start pissing my pants. I was freaking out. I was like, "Oh my god!" And you leaned over to me and you go, "As soon as they say slide in, you slide in. Do you understand?" I went, "Huh?" He goes, "Slide in first." Do you remember saying this to me?
I do. This was actually the thing I was gonna say in my memory as well.
I went, okay. And then he go, "All right, first 2 in," and me and you just dove right in.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, "Okay, all right." And from then on, from the next 5 minutes, I think you called everything. I didn't say a fucking word. I don't know. I can't remember who was face, who was heel. I don't remember much about the match. And afterwards, they kind of, okay, all right. And I remember I ended up getting a match that night on Sunday Night Heat because of that. You were on that list too, but I think you got politicked out.
I did.
Not that you did, but one of us was going to get popped out for somebody else's buddy.
That's what happened. And it was me. Yes, that's my memory too. Yes.
So it's not like you got politicked out. One of us was going. It could have been me or you.
Yep.
But we were on that list to have a tag match that night, I think, against Rosie and Hurricane.
Yes, it was. That's
who it was supposed to be against, but circumstances, whatever. But I ended up getting that match that night. And I remember that's the first time Triple H came up to me afterwards, and he goes, "Oh, so you're down in Louisville?" And I went, "No." He goes, "You don't have anything with us?" I went, "No, sir, not nothing specific." And he goes, "Huh, what's your name?" I said, "Ronnie O'Neill." And he goes, okay, good job out there," and walked off. And I was like, oh, something's going to happen. Turns out nothing happened for X amount of years. But overall, to that point, that's what I mean about being in good hands. And not once were you upset. Not once were you mad. Not once were you, "Oh, shit, I wish it would have been me." You didn't. Your demeanor for me afterwards was you were the happiest brother in the world for me. Mm-hmm. That's the stuff I remember the most, is that not an ounce of envy, nothing. It was just good shit, good for you. But none of that would have happened if you didn't say, "Slide in immediately." Do you understand?
Yeah.
And I'm shitting my pants. I'm like,
I got to add one thing, because I remember you were going, "Wait, what?" I go, "Slide in, me and you." And you're like, "What are we going to do?" I said, "Doesn't matter. Just listen to me. We're going to work a headlock." And you're like, "What do you mean?" I go, "Just shut up and listen." And we get in there, and you were the baby face. We just worked a headlock. And I want to add one thing, because I don't have the best memory, but there's whatever it is.
I don't.
Yeah, I don't either. I don't have a good one either, but there's certain moments that I remember, and this is a very vivid one to me. We have the match, and I remember the cutoff of this match. For whatever reason, you'll know why, because Arn Anderson is sitting in the corner the entire match that we're having. He's just sitting in the corner, so you can't use that buckle. So he's sitting literally in the ring in the corner as we're having this match. And we're just doing a simple match, working headlock, and then I give you this clothesline. You take this fucking awesome bump, bam! And I just hear Arn go, yeah. And I go, oh, now I'm feeling that. Yeah, we got him. So I'm landing in, we're doing our thing. We have the match. And this is why I remember this, because as soon as the match was over, Arn Anderson said, you come here. And we go over to the corner, and he goes, "Johnny, come here." He goes, "Write down these guys' names." And so Arn Anderson made Johnny Ace write our names down on the list. And then as soon as everybody had their matches, the only 2 names that were on the board to have matches that night were me and you in a tag. And I'm like, oh my God, this is it. This is the moment. Like, oh my God, it's going to happen. I think we started talking about what sweet poses we're going to do for our entrance and try to look like a tag team.
Yeah, we started to piece something together.
Yeah. We're like, man, let's, because we were both like jacked and like ready. We were ready. Like this is it. We're ready for this moment. We had new gear. We were going to rock it. And then I got bumped. I find it really interesting, your perspective of saying, I didn't change my demeanor. I didn't poo-poo face about the whole thing. And I think the reason I didn't is that was not my first disappointment. A lot of people in the business, they get their first disappointment because they get a break and then they get the rug pulled out from under them and then they quit. They stop. They're like, they get that first tryout and it doesn't go the way they thought. And then, oh, I'm done. That was my shot. So I quit. I could name you a dozen right now of guys that I know that's what happened. I had already had my, a disappointment with the WWE a couple times in the past. And this was just another day that I'm trying to make it. And I'm working, like you said earlier, we're working for the maybes. And I got a maybe from Arn Anderson. And that's what I ended up focusing on is Arn Anderson went, yeah, when I threw a clothesline. And okay, I didn't get on TV. I didn't get to tag with my buddy this night, but I did get over with Arn Anderson. And I'm going to focus on that instead. And my buddy got on TV, and I have a feeling that something's going to happen for him and he's going to get signed. So I focused on those things. I'm a big believer in focusing on the positive rather than the negative. So I just didn't let that disappointment shatter me in any way.
I think that's just a testament to, because you were young then too. Not that you're not old now, but this is going back 15 years.
Yeah, maybe even more. Yeah, so, it's going back almost 20 years, man. Because this is probably like what, 2004? That's like 19 years ago. It's 2023 now.
This is
so it's about 05, 06 maybe.
And you had, I think, a year or two. How long? When did you start? What year?
I started in 2000.
Okay, so you had a couple of years head start on me. Look, you had every reason to be like, there is disappointment. There's constant disappointments. That's what it takes. Like nothing is ever going to be easy. You always hear the story of Michael Jordan get cut from his high school basketball team. What? How?
Yes. Yeah.
Knowing what we know now about Michael Jordan, but we didn't get to see how he was back then.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like you don't get to see the grind in the practice ring. You don't get to see the dingy gyms. You don't get to see that stuff. You see the bright lights and big. That's what people see nowadays. You had every right to be angry. You had every right to be furious. You were 4 or 5 years in, like you said, you were ready. This is the break, but you didn't. And I think that's something that you have carried throughout all of your years, which in my opinion is one of the many reasons why you are still around.
I want to talk to you about Giver for Connor. It's my latest fundraising campaign that I do through my Giver for Charity organization, and I'm raising money for a very special boy named Connor, who I met when he was just 8 years old. I met him at a wrestling show, and I recently reconnected with him and his family and was surprised to hear that he is a walking miracle. Connor was not supposed to live past the age of 18. And when I recently reconnected with him, I learned that he is now 22 years old. So he is literally a walking miracle. But when I met him when he was only 8, he had a lot of medical issues, and he still has those medical issues, as well as a number of growing medical concerns and hospital bills and medical bills that continue to just keep going up and up. So I decided that I wanted to do something for him and his family. And I've started a fundraiser to try to relieve some of that financial stress off of his family. So if you go right now to givesendgo.com/giver for Connor, that's GIVERFORCONOR, that's givesendgo.com/giver for Connor. You can learn more about this fundraising campaign, and if you would, it'd be great if you could just donate a few dollars. So that's givesendgo.com/giver for Connor. We don't want to just give her for charity. We want to give her for my buddy Connor. givesendgo.com/giver for Connor.
I think a lot of talent nowadays, if they're wronged or they're upset or they're pissed off, the first thing they do is kind of lash out publicly, thinking that it makes us as individuals or wrestlers feel better, feel warranted in what we're arguing about.
Yeah.
Not knowing that it could be a very slow and painful death, or we can just completely cut our kneecaps out from underneath us, and then we're done, and then it's over.
Yeah.
I think we have a hard time picking battles, a lot of young talent nowadays.
Yep.
So to that point, man, I just think, like, again, that's something I remember, and that's something that probably inadvertently taught me that, hey, you know what, your time will come. You'll get a shot. So as on cloud nine as I was that night and wrestling on TV, and oh my God, this same thing. This is gonna happen. This is it. Oh, Triple H just talked to me. I got it.
Yeah.
Nothing happened. Nothing would happen for another 2.5 years. That had nothing to do with Triple H. Like, so I'm sitting there going, guys, come on. And then, sorry, nothing.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
That is how this works. We sign up for the maybes. Maybe it'll happen. Maybe it won't. And if it didn't, at the end of the day, I wrestled in a WWE ring.
Yep.
Holy, wow.
Yes.
I could probably die tomorrow, and I did something I never thought I would do.
So this is making me think of a question that I wanted to ask, because we're already like 45 minutes in and we haven't even talked about you getting signed by WWE yet. And people are going, what the heck? You're not talking about all the stuff that we know about, but that's good because they can hear about that in other interviews.
People know all that stuff.
Yeah.
Man. Like, no one cares. No one cares.
Yeah. I do want to ask you this, though. This is a question that I ask a lot of people. And I think you're very, what's the word I'm looking for?
Knowledgeable, handsome, jacked, tan.
All those. But you're the right person to ask this question because you have a unique perspective on this, because the question is, what's harder, getting signed or staying signed? And you're somebody who got signed, did the OVW thing, got released, had to go back into the Valley, and then get re-signed again by the Monster Company, which is very, very rare. There's very few people that ever, especially during that time, that got released and then got a second chance in developmental. That was not a thing. So you have this unique perspective of being able to get signed twice and living in that valley before getting signed, and then having to navigate the shark water and this once you're there. How do you answer that question? What's harder, getting signed or staying signed?
I think there's two there's two pieces kind of to that a little bit. First is that times have changed. Things are different nowadays, and you know this more than anyone else, opposed to 10, 15 years ago, where it was much more difficult to be seen. It was much more hard to get your name out there. It was much more hard to get bookings, where we live in a day of heavy social media, heavy streaming devices, services. It's much easier to kind of be the king of your own self-promotion. In my opinion, of what I have gone through, it's much harder to stay signed than it is to get signed.
Okay.
Here's why. So when I was lucky in the tryout, I got picked up, luckily. But during those first 3 years of my first time in WWE, that's where you make connections. That's where you make friends. That's where the professionalism aspect of what we do really, really comes into play. So I made, good friends with. That's where I met Cody, who's one of my closest friends to this day. I met guys like Punk there, Joey Mercury and things like that. And the reason why I bring those guys up is because in my quest to get back, in those 4.5 years, I still kept in contact with the Codys and the Punks and the Mercuries and stuff like that, just checking in. Hey, are you still working? What are you doing? Blah, 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 blah. In 2013, an opportunity came up for another tryout. And the only reason I got that was because CM Punk, who was the world champion at the time, put my name. He was asked for 10 guys on the indies who he thought should be signed. And he put my name on that list.
Awesome.
Joey Mercury, who was another coach at the time in FCW, said, okay, him and Punk are tight. And I knew Joey a little bit. And they said, okay. I didn't get back into that tryout because I'd been killing it on the indies. I was just pretty much primarily working in Canada. I wasn't making waves anywhere else. I didn't work for any other companies. I got back there because of the connections and contacts I had made my first time around.
Yeah.
Luckily, getting back in the door, now I have the stamp of those two on my shoulders. So now I really have to keep this job, and I almost lost it again. It's much harder to stay in the system because the system is evolving. The system is moving forward. And there's so many, WWE does a wonderful job of planning ahead for the future, that there's always going to be a revolving door of talent, because you never know who's our next John Cena, who is our next Triple H, who is our next Rock. Do you know what I mean? You don't have 10, 15 years to evolve into that as a young talent. You have a small window of time to see if there's potential to grow into that 10 years down the road. So knowing that, I had to kind of be at my best, and I had to kind of stay ahead of the curve and try and get ahead of the curve and pitch ideas and fall and flop and be told, yeah, you're probably going in one way and we're going another in another couple months. So you better figure it out. Like it's tough. So if you're fortunate enough to get a gig in NXT, or you get a contract somewhere, Impact, AEW, just because you got a contract, don't think that I made it. I'm here. Yeah. It's wonderful. Enjoy it. Celebrate for a night or two. Get to work and stay at work.
That's right.
That's how this works. So, in my opinion, long-winded. I think it's harder to keep it than it is to get it.
Yep.
And especially later on in life, if you have some things personally that are riding on you keeping that job, it can be tough.
There's a lot of indie wrestlers that are listening to this right now, and me and you have this perspective because we've been signed, right? And I can just picture the indie wrestler listening to this right now and go, man, what are you talking about? Like, I've been struggling for 10 years trying to get signed, and I haven't got signed yet. Like, it's way harder. Hey, man, I got that perspective too. I wrestled for 10 years on the indies before I got signed, and I'm telling you, it's harder to stay signed than it is to get signed. It's a whole new world and a whole other level. And when they ask me for advice on how do you get signed, or how do you stay signed, or just how do you be successful, you get asked all these different variations of that question. I have a new answer that I got from a mutual friend of ours, Crazy Steve. I used to say, hey, man, it's about connections, which is what you mentioned, 2 key connections that you had made. And the old adage, it's not what you know, it's who you know. Steve said it so eloquently. I think he heard this from either Bobby Eaton or Ricky Morton. I can't remember exactly who told him this, but they said, hey, it's not about who you know, it's about who you know and who's willing to vouch for you. That's what's important. And you got to stay in the game, because if you stay in the game, you can make those connections. And if you make the right connections and make the right impressions on those connections, then they'll be willing to vouch for you at that maybe time when the planets all align and they get asked, who do you put on your list? That person might put you on the list. But if you take yourself out of the game and you don't make that connection, you're not going to get your name put on that list by maybe that one person you made a connection with.
Yeah, very key. And that's a very good way, like you said, to put it. Being able to vouch for someone, again, like I don't throw around praise lightly, and I don't vouch for people unless, and that's not to mean that I'm better than anybody else, but it's just something that I was taught by having, a guy like CM Punk, who's going to go down as one of the all-time greats, vouch for me. But I can't take that lightly. Now that name is that stamp, like I said, is kind of riding on my shoulders. I can do one of 2 things. I can just sit there and go, yeah, well, that's my boy. And he, if I have any problems, I'm going to run it up to him and da, 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 da. Yeah. I can go that route. Sure. It's not going to last very long. Or I can put my boots on the ground and fucking put in some goddamn work and bust my ass so that whenever he looks in on me, he goes, oh, he's trying. That's all that matters. Like, that's all that he can control. It's all that I can control. I would add to that, in the everyday of evolving professional wrestling, just because things are moving quick and everything is evolving. Because a lot of things that I'm asked nowadays is like, especially with AEW, where things are a little more high volume, high risk, high impact, high action. How do I kind of get my foot in the door? What do I need to do to stand out, or what do I need to do? The thing, ultimately, what this boils down to, professional wrestling, the bottom line is and will always be money. If you can find a way to make yourself a financial asset to a company, no matter what company it is, very top WWE or any independent in your local town, if you can find a way to sell a ticket or a bunch of tickets, you have made yourself a financial asset. The way we do that is not with wrestling moves. It's you can come up with the craziest, wildest, most athletic moves. You and I have both seen them online. There are moves taking place right now that somebody's doing on the indies over in Sweden that the world has never seen yet. That's going to blow our minds, and it's going to last for about a month. Everybody will do it for about 2 weeks, and then it'll be on to the next one. The moves is not what does it. It is the character. It is the marketability aspect of what we do.
For those of you that listened to episode 12 and 13 with my friend David Sahadi, you heard us talk about the new book that he's written called My Dad, My Dying Son. Well, that book is available now on Amazon. You can buy it at mydadmyson.com. That's mydadmysun.com. Here's what my friend David had to say.
My dad wasn't just my dad, he was also my best friend, and that's why his loss hurt so much. They say that deeper the love, the deeper the grief. And I'm still grieving so deeply. And one thing that would bother me was when my dad first passed, the first couple of weeks, I would cry everywhere. I'd go to a restaurant across the street named Stir and cry. And people would hug me and say, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry. And certain people would say, I know how you feel. And I'd say, have you lost a parent? Have you lost a mother or father? And they would say no. And then I would say in my head, not to them, because I know their intention was good, you have no idea how I feel. Because I knew it was going to feel bad, but I had no idea it was going to hurt this much. So it angered me, even though they were trying to do something good. Because unless you've lost a parent that you love so much, nobody can know the feelings, the grief of loss on that deepest of primal levels.
You can purchase your copy of My Dad, My Dying Son at mydadmysun.com. That's mydadmysun.com.
It's the same reason why we love movies. This is what I tell a lot of my students and young talent that ask. I've been on the indies for 7 years. What am I missing? Okay, what's your character? Oh, I'm a striker. Okay, it's not necessarily a character. That's just your preferred method of professional wrestling.
Yep.
Right? What's going to make people care about you? They're not going to care about your kick. You know, they're not going to care about your backflip. They're not. Yep. What's like a movie? Why do you watch a movie and go, my God, that guy deserves an Oscar? Why? Why do you think like that? Dissect that, break it down. He's making you believe in words that he's reading on a piece of paper. He's making them come to life. Our wrestling moves, I can write them all down on a piece of paper, but how I apply my character, how I apply my timing, when and why I do these things are ultimately what's going to make people go, holy, that was an awesome match.
Yeah.
They might not remember any specific move I did, but they're just going to go, that was an awesome match. Holy hell. The character aspect of what we do, the marketability aspect of what we do is what matters most. It's very hard for independent talent that hasn't been through a system to understand that. So if you're watching this right now, put as much emphasis into the character aspect of what we do as you do into the wrestling. And I mean, I think it was TJ Wilson that said this to Breeze once, because Breeze tells me this story. Because Breeze, and he was the same as me when he was first in NXT. I hope he doesn't mind me telling this story. He would tell you if he was sitting right here. He hated to do promos. Okay. And if you watch any Tyler Breeze, Prince Pretty stuff now, you'd be like, how does this guy not like to talk? Because he's so natural once he gets going. He hated doing promos, so we would kind of like hide out in the back, and hopefully he didn't get called. I remember, I think it was Tyson Kidd or TJ Wilson that said to him one day, he's like, would you ever phone it in a match? He goes, what do you mean? He goes, would you ever just phone it in? Would you ever just, He goes, absolutely not. He goes, okay, then why would you do that in regards to promos and character? Why would you just phone it in? They're equally, if not more important. And I went, he told him that, and he told me that. I went, oh, it makes a shit ton of sense.
Yes. We
have to practice all aspects of this industry. And the marketability is one of the biggest aspects. I use Jericho as an example, just to give you, again, it's Chris Jericho. We're talking different levels. He's all time, da-da-da-da-da. But he has called himself the Ayatollah of rock and roll. He's called himself the Wizard. He's called himself Y2J. He's called himself the Painmaker, right? Yeah. I believe the day of gimmicks is passé. There's not really gimmicks anymore. There are gimmicks, right? Mm-hmm. You know a gimmick when you see one.
Yep.
But all those 5 things I just mentioned are all layers to one Chris Jericho.
Mm-hmm.
It's just different sides to his personality that he chooses to bring out. They're not different gimmicks. It's still the same guy.
Yep.
But he's able to tap into all these different layers of his personality to bring out a marketable side of him.
Yes.
I'll pay money to see the Painmaker. I'll pay money to see the Wizard throw a flame. Sure. Because it's Jericho doing it. I'll pay money to see him, that's the idea. That's the concept. So it's an important one, and hopefully it's not one that's overlooked for long by young talent.
And this podcast is called Wrestling is Life is Wrestling. And any lesson that is applicable from wrestling is applicable to life and other avenues. Mm-hmm. Everything that you just said is a business lesson. Like in any business, if you want to be successful at anything that you're trying to accomplish in a business sense, the marketability is key. And you have to make people care about you and make them feel something. Doesn't matter if you can make them think something, know something. They don't care about what you tell them. They only are going to care and remember what you made them feel. Mm-hmm. And we often invert it when we're younger. We think, oh man, Jericho's awesome because he can do a moonsault and he has a really cool finisher and the people go crazy for it. No. They're going crazy because they care about him. And that just happens to be one of the moves that he does and they associate with him. So now they go crazy, but he's over. Once you're over, you can do anything, but you got to get over by making them feel something about you. And if you're running a business and you can make people feel something about your product, in our case, the product is us, but if you can make them feel something and associate it with your product, you've won. And that's the key. You've won.
Yeah. Can you hear me? Okay. My dog's going nuts.
I can hear you. It's all good.
Okay. Yeah. The other side of that too, and it's correlating with it is, because that can be very daunting if you tell a young talent that they're going to say, where do I start? Where do I even begin? I was a very good wrestler for 14 years, very good professional wrestler, could do whatever, make it look easy, No one cared until I started doing this. No one cared. Yep. The reason being is the reason why the Perfect 10 works so well is that a 40-year-old father can sit there and flash his hands in the air looking down at his 4-year-old son or daughter doing the same thing. That father or mother might not like me. Oh, the 10 guy, oh God, he's boring. He's got nothing. But when they look down and see their child having the time of their life and they go, oh, they're doing it. Hey, honey, take a picture of this real quick.
Yeah.
You're the catalyst for creating a moment that they're going to remember, right? So if you can find a way to either, like you said, make people care about you as an individual, get over that way by making them care about the character that you've created, or if you can find a way, and this is where Jericho's another genius, and it pains me to put him over the way I do. If you can find a way for your audience to connect with one another and you're the catalyst for it,
yeah,
you'll do it. Why do you think even when he turned heel, his song Judas never changed?
Right.
They all sing together, and he just stands there and goes, I've sang this song 1,000 fucking times.
Yeah.
Oh, he's probably sick as hell of it, but he looks around and he goes, they're all singing, they're all having the time of their lives, and I'm the reason for it.
Yeah.
So young talent, if you can find a way to either make people care about you as an individual or find a way for them to collectively have a great time with each other and you be the reason for it, you're going to make money for that company that you work for.
That's awesome. I want to be mindful of your time. We're running down. We didn't hit the 2017 Royal Rumble. We didn't hit you getting signed by AEW. We didn't hit any of the Perfect 10 stuff.
I've seen you do part twos. I've seen you do part twos with people.
Yeah.
I would be almost offended if you didn't say, "How about a part two?" You didn't put me over in the beginning enough, so I would appreciate a part two.
I'm already gonna split what we just had into two, so it's gonna have to be a part three because what we just did is gonna get split in half. We're gonna have a part 1 and 2 of what we just did, so I'm gonna have to bring you back for a 3 and a 4.
Oh, so would 4 be the most episodes that you've had with one guest?
It would be. You would be
Well,
breaking a. You'd be
yeah, fuck
breaking a
everybody
record.
else. I want to be the most.
Okay. Before we go, I want to give you an opportunity to plug something, because this last 15, 20 minutes, you've been dropping all this knowledge, and we didn't even say the name of it. I want to put over Flatbacks Academy, and your school. If there's any, independent wrestler that's listening to this and going, oh my God, they just kind of had any light bulbs go off because of the things that you said. You're constantly having light bulbs go off at your Flatbacks Academy. I've been there. It's an amazing place. Give them the info if anybody is considering getting into the business or considering taking their game to the next level. How can they get in touch with you and get involved with Flatbacks Academy?
I appreciate that, buddy. The website is flatbackswrestlingschool.com.
Okay.
We can be found online and everything like that. We do about 5 courses a year. We're not a drop-in school. Our time is dedicated to our students specifically, and we train people of all levels, whether you're experienced starting off the very first time. We also have people that are 7, 8 years in that are going, I'm stuck. How do I get to that next level? Kind of like what you were talking about a little bit earlier. What big companies are looking for. Breeze still works for WWE. He's just in a different department, but he's there all the time. We still have a lot of WWE talent that comes to us to train, to work, and then they go back to TVs the next week. So we kind of teach our young talents or independent guys kind of in the mold of what television wrestling is. So hopefully when they get an opportunity, they're aware of some of the little things that might make them stand out from somebody who maybe isn't as aware. So feel free to check us out. There's an email link in there. You can send us an email, shoot your shot, and try and get in one of those courses. I believe our 2024 courses are all laid out on the website. So you can it's all set out a year in advance. We also offer student housing, limited beds, but we do what we can for the young aspiring professional wrestler out there.
Awesome. Yes, go check that out. I wholeheartedly we talked about people putting their stamp of approval on people and things. I do not put my stamp of approval on that many wrestling schools, but this one I can, and I can talk about it firsthand because I've been there and I've seen how you operate, and it is grade A, top of the line, top shelf, all tippity top. Anything I can say positive about it, I'm saying it right now. Definitely go check out Flatbacks. We also talked about adding value to yourself monetarily. I want to use you to add value to something right now, because normally what I do is after the interview, I go behind the paywall and I offer a bonus story to my patrons that if you don't get this unless you give me money and become a patron. So I want to steal 2 more minutes of your time. We're going to end the free podcast right now, and then we're going to go behind the paywall, and I'm going to put you on the spot. I haven't done this to any of my other guests. I'm going to do it to you. If you go to patreon.com/Cody Deaner, you're going to listen to Shawn Spears give you a story of what was going through his mind the moment he's standing behind the curtain and about to go out to the ring to be number 10 in the Royal Rumble 2017. He's going to give us that exclusive story of what was going through his mind over on patreon.com/Cody Deaner. Can you do that for my patron, Shawn Spears?
Oh, hell yeah. I could do that for that, and I could do it for the hustler in you, baby. I love it. I love it. That's working right there.
Hell yeah, brother. Okay, thanks for doing this, brother. I love you.
Love you too, buddy. Thank you.
That's going to do it for another episode of Wrestling is Life is Wrestling. Do you want to hear this story? This 2017 Royal Rumble story that's going to make you laugh and going to make you cry. I guarantee you will enjoy this story and learning about this kind of behind the scenes Royal Rumble situation with the Perfect 10, Tye Dillinger, how it came to be, how he found out that he was going to be in the Royal Rumble, which is hilarious and amazing. And then the response that he got from his colleagues, other WWE wrestlers and performers and people on the roster, the response that he got, That's the touching part. That's going to make you cry. So go watch or listen to this bonus story over at patreon.com/Cody Deaner. You don't just get a really cool story, but you're supporting me and this project and this podcast in the meantime. Also, if you want to support, head on over to restwhendead.ca or go to Instagram, restwhendead clothing. Check out the collection. They're my sponsor. I'm the VP. I love it. I love what they're doing. I love every single one of their designs. I literally own every single t-shirt in the collection. Go and check them out right now on restwhendead.ca. Consider buying yourself some Rest When Dead clothing. Christmas time's coming up. Does your wife need a new t-shirt? Does she need a new tank top? Oh, there's women's stuff too. So head on over to restwhendead.ca. Grab yourself some Rest When Dead swag. Check out the Crazy Steve and Jody Threat signature series as well. Other ways you can support is by going to prowrestlingtees.com/Cody Deaner. Pick yourself up a t-shirt. Brand new Wrestling is Life is Wrestling with Cody Deaner t-shirts over there, my Pro Wrestling Tees store. Or you can get a cameo with me over at cameo.com/Cody Deaner. Do you want to bring me to your wrestling show? Promoters, you want me to be on your show? Spread my love of wrestling with your wrestling promotion and your fans? Book me. How do you do that? Go to book Cody at CodyDeaner.com and I will come to your wrestling event and spread my love of professional wrestling and amaze your fans. I'll guarantee you that right now. I will amaze them and I will wow them and I will have fun doing it because independent wrestling is where it's at. And that's what I love to do. So bring me to your show. Book Cody at CodyDeaner.com. You've heard me say, especially at the top of the show, when I rattle off all of my jobs, one of my jobs is I'm a professional and traveling motivational speaker. I go into schools, I go into youth groups, I speak at youth events and conferences. If you're somebody who is associated with the school, you're a teacher or you're an administrator or you have a teacher friend or an administration friend or someone who's putting on a youth event and you're like, man, it'd be cool to have a professional wrestler there, but not just a professional wrestler, someone who has also spoken professionally for many years and told stories and allowed youth to learn through his successes and failures. Hey, why don't we book this Cody Deaner dude? Well, you can do that. You can go to CodyDeaner.com and then it will send you from there to my speaking page, which is ChrisGraySpeaks.com. That's Gray with an A, ChrisGraySpeaks.com. You can see some speaking reels, the topics that I speak about, and a bunch of testimonials from a lot of satisfied clients who have brought me to their school and worked with their students. That's ChrisGraySpeaks.com. That does it for another episode. Before we leave, let's just say another thank you to Shawn Spears for being vulnerable with us and for just opening up and telling us some things that we didn't know. I have been Shawn Spears' friend for 2 decades, and there was things that I didn't know about Shawn that I learned from this conversation. So thank you for being on the show, Shawn. You're awesome. I will continue to be your friend, and I'm going to continue to hound you to do some more of these because I think I want a part 3 and I think I want a part 4. I want a part 3 and 4 with my buddy Shawn Spears. That conversation was too good. I did not want it to end. And if you want Shawn Spears to come back on, hey, drop me a line. Head on to social media. Go over to @Cody Deaner. Drop Shawn Spears a line on Twitter and Instagram. Let him know that you loved this episode. Tell him what you got out of it and let him know, hey, go back on for part 3 and 4 with Deaner. We want to hear some more from you because I learned a lot. I know you did too. And this is exactly why I do this podcast. It's for you. So we can spread some love and spread the positivity. Next week, we have another wicked, awesome guest. Someone who I wanted to have on this show because I listened to him on another podcast. Now, next week's guest doesn't do a lot of podcasts. He even says that in our conversation. He doesn't do a lot of podcasts, but he decided he wanted to do one with me, not just because he likes me and he thinks I'm a cool dude, but he likes what we're doing with this show. And I listened to him do another podcast where he talked about his origin story, about just his life, growing up and some circumstances surrounding his parents and how that kind of ended up colliding with his journey into professional wrestling, and I thought it was fascinating and it was very touching. And I was like, okay, that's the kind of stuff that I want to talk about, how our decisions to become professional wrestlers collide with our real life in a really powerful and meaningful way. That applies directly to next week's guest. I'm not going to tell you who it is right now, but you are going to have to go on over to @Cody Deaner on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. We still call it Twitter, X, whatever. I'm going to call it Twitter until the day I die, probably. Head on over to my social media, and in the coming days, you will learn who next week's guest is going to be. And also in the next coming days, probably this weekend, if you're listening to this on Thursday, it's going to be uploaded on Sunday on my Patreon, on patreon.com/Cody Deaner. It will not be part 1 and part 2 with this next guest. It will be the full conversation over on patreon.com/Cody Deaner. Have I said that enough in this intro and outro? Have I said patreon.com/Cody Deaner enough? I want to push people over to that because I believe in giving you quality content. I got some bonus stories from next week's guest, as well as the full conversation early and ad-free over at what is it? Oh, let me say it again, patreon.com/Cody Deaner. Until next week, again, thank you to my listeners for supporting this journey that I've gone on in the podcasting world. Thank you for supporting my sponsors, Rest When Dead Clothing Company. Thank you for being you. Thank you for being awesome. Thank you for joining me here this week and for coming back next week when we will learn more about why wrestling is life is wrestling. See you next week, guys.
Wrestling is life. Wrestling is life. Wrestling is life is wrestling.